Praise you, Lord.
Arul, we are live, I think.
Yes, we are.
Are we live?
We should be, Aaron.
Okay, live and direct.
You are in charge.
Okay, right. Okay, well, good evening, everyone, to everyone watching, wherever you are. Grace and peace from our Lord Jesus Christ be with you all. Thank you for joining us this evening. Our topic for this evening's debate will be Bible versus the Quran and the relationships between man and woman. In front of us this evening, we have our usual star here, Brother Arul Velusamy, and our guest here is Mashud, and I understand Mashud has used to be a regular at Speaker's Corner, and he's here today to represent the Islamic perspective with regards to men and women's relationship in the Islamic scripture, with Brother Arul Velusamy giving the perspective from the biblical scripture. I'd like to ask our guest Mashud now if you'd like to just give just a brief 1-minute introduction on yourself, and then Brother Arul, if you give a 1-minute introduction after that, and then I'll take our audience through the format before I then release you into cracking on with the debate. So in your own time, Mashud.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Arul and Aaron, for inviting me. So Aaron was right. I used to be quite a regular in Hyde Park Speaker's Corner way back in the day, many years ago, and I just came out of the blue a couple of weeks ago and bumped into Arul, where Arul and I used to have some friendly debates many years ago. So yeah, I am a Muslim. I actually belong to the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, and I'm here to discuss about women, Islam, and the Bible. So I have an interest in dialogue with fellow Muslims and with fellow Christians. So glad to be here.
All right, thank you, Mashud. Arul.
Yeah, well, I'm Arul Velusamy. Of course, Operation Stephen is the ministry effort that we have. I'm a Christian evangelist. So, yeah, for many years now, I have been presenting a defense for the Christian worldview. And also, quite recently, I began doing sort of delivery of content in regards to other religions, other worldviews, in regards to saying why they are wrong and so on. And like Mash said, we had many very interesting interactions in sort of Speaker's Corner 1.0, the previous version, not the current one. And was pleasantly surprised to run into him a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, here we go. We have him here. So Mash, great to have you in our channel and doing a live stream. And yeah, very interested in discussing the topic at hand today.
Good. It's back on 1 minute. Thanks, Brother Arul. Okay, I'll just quickly run through our format now so we can get this going as quickly as we can. Just for our audience watching, there'll be a 10-minute intro per perspective. So our guest will be going first, as is polite. So there'll be a 10-minute intro from Mashud, followed by a 10-minute intro from Arul, and then we'll switch back over to our guest for 45 minutes defense of the Islamic position, where there will be probing questions from the Christian perspective, and then there'll be a 45-minute section from the Christian side, once again where there'll be probing questions from the Islamic side as well. At the end of this, there'll then be a chance for a 2-minute conclusion each. I will also be keeping time, and I will give a 5-minute warning in each 10-minute intro. Then I will give a 1-minute warning just to let our guests know that their time is almost up. In the 45-minute section, I will give a 22-minute warning, and then a warning with the remaining 5 minutes at the end of each section. So can I just confirm that you both understood? Both?
Yep.
Okay, then
just to have a great start, I have water on my keyboard, but that's fine, I think. Sorry.
Okay, then the floor is yours, gentlemen. Just let me know when you want to start, and then I'll give it a start.
I'm starting first, right?
Yes.
Okay, then.
10 minutes.
Go. Okay. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. I seek refuge with Allah from Satan the accursed. In the name of Allah, the gracious, the merciful. Assalamu alaikum, Arul and Aaron. Aaron, thank you for inviting me here. So I am in fact going to go straight into this topic. I've got a limited amount of time. So I'm going to discuss three types of women in Islam and the relationships. That is the mother, the daughter, and the wife. And finally, I'll have a little bit of a discussion about what the authority is of the man and the woman relationship. So the role of the woman in Islam is tremendously important. In fact, we have direct instruction in the Holy Quran about to be good to parents, specifically the mother. And God says, and we have enjoined upon man concerning his parents. His mother bears him in weakness upon weakness, and his weaning takes 2 years to give thanks to me and to thy parents. And this continues every day in our daily prayers. 5 times we bless our parents. In fact, another narration of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has it that a man came to him and said, "Who is most deserving of fine treatment from my hand?" The Prophet said, "Your mother." The man goes, "Okay, who's next?" And the Prophet said, "Your mother." And the man said, "Who next?" And the Prophet said, "Your mother." And the man said, "Who next?" And then finally the Prophet said, "Your father." So showing that the 3 times more amount of importance the mother has compared to the father in many relationship statuses. We also have in the Quran that Prophet Jesus in Islam, he is commanded, he's instructed in his really young age to be dutiful to his mother. So that's the Islamic perspective in a nutshell regarding the mother. When it comes to the Bible, I'm just going to talk a little bit about that regarding my point of view here. That the Bible too contains good instructions to the parents, but we get kind of mixed messages. I mean, I'll give the example that Paul advocates strongly that children should obey their parents. That's all well and good. But then we have the extreme teaching that the disobedient child is to be stoned in the Old Testament, but which nobody would really do nowadays. But then we have rather odd and opposite hints as well. In the Gospels, the Gospel of John, for example, in the marriage of Cana, when Jesus, the disciple, and his mother go to a marriage and the wine runs out. Mary, the mother, goes to Jesus and tells him, "Look, the wine has run out." And instead of acknowledging it and doing, Jesus seems to rather blurt out, "Woman, what does that have to do with me? My hour hasn't yet come." So it's a bit of an odd one for us. Or also, again, when the man, and this is another gospel, approaches Jesus and says, "I want to follow you," but he wants to bury his dead father, or he wants to bury his father. He says to which Jesus says, "Follow me. Leave the dead to bury the dead." I mean, this isn't. You won't find these kind of teachings in the Quran. Turning our attention to daughters now. Daughters generally were looked down upon around the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be pleasantly upon him. In fact, in many nations, even now, daughters are looked down upon. But then you have an explicit statement by the Prophet saying, "I will enter the garden, i.e. paradise, with someone who brings up 2 daughters really well until they come of age. And we will be like this." And he put 2 fingers up. That's how they're showing the closeness of they'll be. So this is the Islamic perspective. There's many other traditions as well, and the way he treated his daughters as well. The treatment of daughters and virgins, especially in the Bible, I'm going to contrast it. It is quite a bit different. You have examples of righteous men offering their daughters to be, to be raped in essence. I mean, for example, in Genesis 9, the righteous man Lot, according to the Bible, not according to Islam, according to the Bible, offers his virgin daughters to the lustful men in the village, saying, "Do to them as you please." That's not according to Islam at all. Granted, you can probably admit that the narration continues in Genesis, where these daughters aren't maybe that innocent after all. I guess they do in the end drug their father and sleep with him. None of that is mentioned in the Quranic account of our prophet Lot in our account. But then also we have, which is another kind of event which I found pretty odd as well when it comes to virgin girls in the Old Testament, that if a girl is like, there's a whole narration, I think in Numbers, I'm thinking, or Exodus, where if a virgin girl is caught by a man and is raped, the rapist shall pay 50 shekels. I think that's relatively not a massive fine, about 400 or 500 pounds, and then marry her. So that's a pretty an odd instruction for us when it comes to rape. We wouldn't definitely recommend marrying the rapist. So now let's turn to the wives. So the Holy Quran says, and one of the signs is that He created wives for you from amongst yourselves, that you may find peace and mind in them. And He's put love and tenderness between you. And this was perfectly illustrated when the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, received his first revelation. He was shocked and shaking, and he went first to his wife, whom he found comfort in. In fact, wives are a protection. They are a garment for you, and you are a garment for them. A garment is something which covers shame, protects against the elements, beautifies someone as well. So yes, the wife serves a protection for the husband. She's like the closest and most intimate companion. She knows his weaknesses, she hides them or covers them, she helps improve his working character, and she's pleasing to him in many, many ways. I mean, this one sentence encompasses a huge amount. Treatment of wives is massively important. The Prophet said many times, the best of you is the one who is best to his wife. So this is something not to be taken lightly. In fact, some people we have who do many good deeds, who will serve God, but then don't treat their wives very well. You have the case of Abdullah bin Amir, who in a hadith where the Prophet said to him, "Oh Abdullah, have I not been informed that you fast all day and you pray all night?" And he said, "Yes." And the Prophet said, "Don't do that. Observe the fast sometimes and leave the fast sometimes. Pray sometimes at night, but then sleep as well." The Prophet said, "Your body has a right over you, your eyes have a right over you, and your wife has a right over you." I'm not totally aware of this kind of teaching in the Bible. You get the opposite in a sense, but not the opposite in the sense that you treat them badly, but in the sense that Paul advises his churches, in fact, in words, not to marry, because they'll preoccupy themselves with other people rather than God. I find this a bit odd. I find it against the laws of nature in that sense, and I think many priests, I'm not saying you're priests, but some priests around the world in history have actually taken this advice and become celibate and not married at all. But in the end, their desires do kick in, and some of them, not all of them, but some of them had ended up, extracting that desire in really poor ways, especially on children. So I don't recommend this teaching at all. In fact, it goes against Genesis from what I can see, where God says it's not good for man to be alone. And our Prophet strongly advocates marriage. He said it's part of his sunnah, his practice as well. In Islam, the husband is in fact also instructed to provide for the wife and for the family. He can't keep his money for himself. The Prophet said, "Give to your wife food which you eat. Clothe her with the same clothes you clothe yourself with. Don't revile her and do not beat her." On the other hand, the wife can in fact do whatever she pleases with her own money. And this is in fact the viewpoint of the Ahmadi Muslim community, the Hanafis, the Shafis, the Hanbalis, and the majority of the Sunni scholars as well. I don't find this in the case in the Bible. Perhaps maybe Arul can explain later on what happens with the wife's money, and whether is it the case where the wife's money is also the husband's money. I don't know, to be honest. So that'll be an interesting discussion afterwards. We can find out. When it comes to authority of women, yes, a husband is like in the Bible. The husband has the final authority, I guess, in the relationship. It doesn't mean it's a form of oppression, though. So when it comes to decisions, they should confer, but then he has a final say. Many Muslims, in fact, at the time of the Prophet, didn't want their wives to go out and to the mosque and pray, but the Prophet said explicitly, let them pray. In fact, when they used to go to the mosques and pray, they were allowed to speak and allowed to talk as well. You have the famous case where the Caliph, Hazrat Umar, was delivering a sermon and he advocated something, and a woman shouted from the side saying, "Oh Umar, what you're saying is incorrect according to the Quran," and she corrected him, and Umar conceded and said, "Yes, the woman is right, but I am wrong." You find the opposite here, where the author of the letter of Timothy in the Bible, in fact, says that women should learn in silence and be submissive. They can't teach, and he blames that on Eve. And basically, and many church late fathers have kind of expressed this and criticized women a lot more as well. But anyway, just to conclude, these are just some examples where how Islam advocates treated a woman. The mother is treated the best. The father would be very close when he raises two daughters, and the best of people are those who are best to their wives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mishud. Yeah, thank you very much. Just waiting for Arul to quickly come back. Can you? You're on mute, bro.
Apologies, my wife wanted a baby monitor charger, which
Okay.
was here, unfortunately. So I didn't want to, risk that. But I was hearing all the time. Thank you very much.
Okay. Let me know when you're ready to go.
Okay. Sure.
Okay.
I am ready now, through God's grace.
Okay.
All right. Mash, thank you for that presentation. Of course, I come from the Christian perspective. What is my objective today? We come from two very different worldviews, very, very different, contradicting worldviews, clearly. There are many ways in which we can find out where is that one true God. Is he the God of the Bible or God of the Quran? And there are many ways in which we can do this. One of the important ways is in figuring out the morality of that God. Is he better than regular human beings? And that is where my main argument today is going to be God of the Bible very clearly is much better than regular human beings, whereas clearly whoever was the inspiration behind the Quran comes across as subhuman in his moral behavior. That's going to be my main argument. Ultimately, I'd like to hope that women, Islamic women across the world, I'd like to invite them to leave Islam and come follow Jesus Christ. And for very friendly people like Mash, I'd like to again make an invitation. I'm sure you would respect your women. And in doing that, I'd really like you to leave Islam and come follow Jesus Christ. That's my objective. Now, let me present my actual case. Let me get to the crux of the issue, the main areas of difference. And I know Mash mentioned a few different examples and so on, but I think what Mash failed to see is we ought to be comparing God's teachings, God's admonition, God's exhortation in the Bible versus the supposed God's exhortation, the exhortation in the Quran. And what do we take to get to the details of this? The perfect example, according to Islam, Muhammad himself, versus the Mosaic law or Jesus himself as the examples. I'd really like to narrow down there. Mash did mention about wives, daughters, wives, and mothers. I'd like to get to the root, which are the wives, because wives are the future mothers, and they produce daughters, and daughters begin imitating the wives. Again, they see the respect that the wives receive and continue with that. So I'd like to narrow down to the wives. And here are the main differences I see. Two main areas. Individually, the view of women in the Bible versus in the Quran. When you talk about the Bible, since the time of creation, going even up to the point of entering into eternity and living in eternity, you find the woman being equal to a man. Equal, that is the key part. Individually equal to man. You find this through various specific details. And that is the first main point I'm going to dwell on. And the second main point I'll dwell on is when it comes to relationships between them, especially man, woman, marital relationship, wife, husband relationship, what you find is marriage as an institution is presented in a very noble form in the Bible. You can see that it is clearly from God by looking at the details. In contrast, when you look at who you consider to be the perfect example in the Quran, namely Muhammad himself, the view of women he had was, despite all the references that Mash made, I'm going to go into some specific details, very, very poor. And the institution of marriage was sort of an abomination. I mean, if you look at the details of how marriages work in Islam, you might as well not call it marriage. And that is precisely why I did not want the title to even use the word marriage. Because look at the details, it's essentially sexual abomination, which has just been branded, whitewashed, and given a new name, namely marriage. As a matter of fact, it is not even given a new name, namely marriage. It is actually given a very obscene name, nikah, but which is understood or interpreted as marriage by the Islamic community. Let's deal with the details now. Woman in the Bible made in the image of God, similar to the man, from the man, equal to man, helper comparable to man at creation. Fast forward Malachi, before the time of Jesus, the Bible very clearly says God was extremely unhappy when men left their wives of their youth. One wife, one husband, equality. Relationship between them was not objectified, but rather dignified. Take the example of Islam. You can have sex slaves. You can have 4 wives at a time. Wives were supposed to be treated as land to be irrigated. Wives ought to cover up themselves as if they are like a creation by mistake. They are people who ought to be excused from society. Burqa, hijab, beating women in the Quran. Here, I know Mash said no beating, but in the Quran you have references to how women could be beaten. And most women are going to be in hell, according to the Quran. So these are details we find. Not respect. Women are sub men, very clearly. Unless if Mash needs to contradict me and tell me women are given a good position, instead of using all the fluffy words that he has used, he needs to tackle with the specific points that I've made. 4 wives, 1 man. Why not 4 husbands, 1 woman? Sorry, 1 woman. Beating women. Why not women beating the husband? Most women are in hell. Why not most men in hell? Please tackle these specific details. Don't give me fluffy words. Very important. Now, marriage as an institution. In the Bible, age appropriate, relationship appropriate, and the commitment is honorable, lifelong commitment, holy, not sexually motivated, long lasting, with equal commitment from both sides. This is what marriage is in the Bible, from not Lot, not anyone else, but from the examples of the Mosaic Torah. That is what that is God's heart, not Lot, not David, not Solomon. God's heart is in the Mosaic law. God's heart is in Jesus Christ, not in anything else. Take in contrast the Quran. What do you find? Marrying a 6-year-old girl in Islam, 6-year-old girl, and consummating the marriage when she is 9 years, not age appropriate. Relationship appropriate. You can even marry close relatives who are forbidden from being married, from being genuine, candidates for being wives. Relationship inappropriate. So you can get married to your adopted son's wife, daughter-in-law. You can get married to. You can get married without even your current wife's knowledge. Like I said earlier, you can have up to 4 wives at any time. If you want a 5th one, divorce one of them and get married. 4 at a time. And marriage as an institution is not an honorable institution. The commitment isn't lifelong and it is not holy, but it is rather just sexual abomination, given a new word called nikah, which is again only halfway through. It's a clear reference to sexual intention as being the main intention of the marriage, and then that's what is interpreted as marriage. Now, examples. Halala marriage, triple talaq. You can just say talaq, 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 your wife is gone. And when your wife is gone, if you need to marry her again, the wife needs to get have sex with someone else, even for a short period of time, before the original husband could marry. This is abomination. in the sight of God of the Bible. Like I said earlier, marriage is the word used for marriage in the Quran, in Islam, isn't even the word marriage. It's really sexual intercourse. That gives the entire picture very clearly. In other words, my dear friends, view of women, very, very low. Institution of marriage, really an abomination. There is no marriage in Islam. Leave Islam, come to the Lord Jesus Christ. And in Jesus Christ, you find holy commitment.
Thank you, Arul.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mashid. Okay, we'll now move on to our cross-examination, where Mashid will give a 45 minutes explanation, where he's going to be defending the Islamic position with probing questions from Arul. So when you are ready, Mashid, I'll kick the clock off.
Yeah, sure. So, okay. Thank you, Arul, for all of that. Let's start the thing. So, okay, I guess you focused more on the equality, and I think I will begin focusing on that. And what I liked, what you did say, was that we compared the Islamic teaching to the whole biblical teaching. So you're not just talking about the New Testament, you're going to talk about the Old Testament as well. But I'd like to ask you questions about both of those. And your strongest point that you did say was that man and woman are equal.
Apologies, Mash. I think I'm going to be asked. Apologies. There is a mistake. You are defending right now. Sorry.
Aaron,
Yes.
I thought you were just going to make a brief note before I start with my question.
Start again, Aaron. I apologize.
Yeah, no, that's no problem. That's no problem.
Shall we start over?
Yeah, I was going to say let's start again. Let's
start again. My bad. My bad.
Yeah, no, it's okay. No, take your time. No problem. All right, go.
Sure. Mash, let's begin with wives, husbands, and wives. Quickly, do we agree that you can have four? Any man can have 4 wives at a time?
Under certain circumstances, yes.
Well, okay. The Quran is very clear. We can read the Quranic verse if you want. There is no extra qualification. 4 wives at a time. There is no objective extra qualification. Very subjective, no objective extra qualification. Do we agree on that?
So you got to look at the context. And when it does talk about that, it's talking a lot about orphans and so forth. So the primary reason for polygamy in marriage is in essence, to take care of the woman and the child. That is the primary reason for it. So that's where I would say that's the main focus of marriage.
I apologize. I mean, which are you using scriptures to your Quran to?
Yes, I was talking about. I was talking about the Quran.
From your own
idea. In Surah Nisa, isn't it?
Okay, so let's get the details here.
Let me try to find the verse as well. Sorry, I don't know the top of my head. Do you know what the verse reference off the top of your head?
Yeah, sorry, apologies. Because my keyboard isn't working properly, I'm in a bit of a mess at the moment.
No.
Apologies. So, okay, let's try. Surah 2, somewhere in Surah 2 you should find. Okay, let's see.
Chapter 4, verse 3, you'll find it, I think.
Yeah, chapter 4, verse 3. Yeah, let's read that, please.
Yeah.
So, chapter 4, verse 3. And if you fear that you cannot do justice to the orphans, then marry from the women permitted to you 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
So it's not talking about taking care of the orphans, is it?
It's at that time, taking care of orphans were often happened when the father died, a lot of times in battle. So this was the main reason. Now I'm not saying it's the only reason, but this was the primary reason.
Let's stick to the verse itself.
Okay.
Let's stick to the verse itself. I'd really like to stick to the verse. If you fear that you cannot do justice to the orphans, then marry. In other words, where do you get the idea that they're trying to help the orphan? They're really saying, well, if you like to take orphans, more and more for you, well, then you can. You can do 2, 3, or 4.
Got it.
That's what it's saying.
So I see you're interpreting it to orphans meaning orphan women, girls. Is that how you are interpreting this? clarify.
But if you read that verse 3 and let me know what the text says, I'll be really happy with that.
Got it. So the whole chapter begins with relationship in the first verse, and then the previous verse says, "And give to the orphans their property, take care of them." And then it says, "If you fear that you not be able to fare in dealing with the orphans, then marry of women as are agreeable to you, 2, 3, or 4." Our interpretations, orphans are just that. They are children who have nobody to take care of them, i.e. a lot of times with women as well, with women who have multiple children but no male to take care of them in this main circumstance. And I think the commentaries, classical and present ones as well, and especially our commentary, expressly says that this is to take care of the women who have no husband and their children, to take them in so that you can basically, marry them and care for them.
But okay, that's not what the text is saying. But in any case, so you are essentially saying to take care of more children, you need more wives.
To take
Why not more husbands?
So okay, explain. So you're saying, no, what do you mean more husband? Can you explain that?
I mean, if the entire point is you need more human resource to take care, maybe you can have more people helping you out. Maybe you have your.
The
Why
Quran
wives?
It's for all time and all different teachings. And in most societies back in the past, and in many societies now, it is the man who is a primary breadwinner. Now, the Quran doesn't say that if in now circumstance, for God forbid, if I die and my wife is left with the 4 children, she doesn't have to marry somebody else or become a second wife. She can potentially take care of herself in this society because I left with money, she has family and so forth. But in many other societies, the woman didn't have that. Widows, especially in biblical times as well, were considered the most degraded. It was really harsh for women, for widows. So in those circumstances, for them to get married and be a second wife was a very
Mash. I really need to stop you there because you're saying too many things which is not in the text.
Okay.
What I know, you may, like many other Muslims, may have noble goals, and with all good intention, you may even disagree with the Quran. But my main point is, I'd like to find out what the Quran gives, not what you think, what the Quran gives. So the verse itself is talking about one man, 4 wives at a time, 2, 3, 4. And the verse itself isn't giving, the verse itself is clear, not four men, 1 wife.
But it's my only
so there's no
thing.
equality
You
there.
are permitted, yes, you are permitted to marry 2, 3, up to 4 as a maximum. And my explanation is that the primary purpose of this is to deal with the orphans.
If to deal with orphans, you need women.
So I can understand that interpretation, but my interpretation would be the orphans' children. Why those who don't have a father to take care of them. That would be my primary interpretation. And I think that's more or less the classical interpretation as well.
The classical interpretation is very, very clear. So essentially, men can have 4 wives at a time. Take all the Muhammad had many wives. Why did he have many wives? Not because he had to take care. I mean, let's take the example of Muhammad. Which children did he have to take care of when he married the additional wives?
So he married divorcees and widows as well. I'll have to Google which one, but I think it was like a half-half thing. Many of the women, their husbands had passed away or been martyred in battles. So he married them. Other women were divorced, and he married them as well. I think Aisha was the only non-married or divorcee was the one but basically he took care of them. That was one of his primary goals.
Let me ask you this.
Go for it.
When you have a commitment between one man and multiple wives, do we agree that already puts the women under the men in terms of esteem? Do we agree on that?
So yes,
we are almost as if we are saying, well, we don't allow the reverse way, and so clearly men are the superior beings, women are the inferior beings. Do we agree on that?
So no, in Islam, men have authority, in the final say, as I said in the talk as well. But there are numerous problems, if you want me to go into it, of the other way around. But I'm answering your questions, so yeah, for me,
Sure.
they have authority.
Okay, that's fine. Now let's get to Muhammad as a perfect example.
Yep,
Marrying a 6-year-old child.
got it. Okay then.
What is this particular? What is the need to marry a 6-year-old child?
So this is you're referring to Hazrat Aisha, am I right?
That's right.
Got it. Okay then. So this has been a big contention for a lot of modern critics. The age of her marriage. I think you got to look it back in context. Would be my answer to that. Lifespan of generally people, especially women, was very, very little compared to as it is now. It's not in the 80s. You're looking at like the 30s or the 40s. You got to look at the historical context as well. So when Hazrat Khadija, the first wife of the Prophet, had passed away, he was obviously single. In fact, Aisha was engaged before the Prophet had married her. She was engaged to another man, which Hazrat Abu Bakr prior, because of Islam, had actually broken the engagement. She was in fact recommended to the Prophet by Khawla bint Hatim.
Mash,
Yes.
Quran is an example for all time.
Okay.
Are you saying today it is perfect to marry a 6-year-old child? Is that what you're saying?
No. So first thing you got to take into account, the nikah can happen at a very young age. Consummating the marriage is a different thing, which happens
9 years.
potentially depending on whether the woman, the girl is she hits puberty and she can actually carry out the act. So
9-year-old child. So you are saying men can marry, old men especially,
when it
can marry a
comes
9-year-old child. Is that what you're saying?
when it comes to the age, this is where it's a bit contentious. We have conflicting accounts of the age, but some modern scholars have critiqued this and said actually it's a bit odd that the age has been stressed in so many of these hadiths. And they've actually argued that the very mention of age seems to be, it was ignored by early biographers, it was ignored by many critics in the last century. But they were basically saying that a lot of the writers, or even Aisha, it would have been like a kind of a boast that I got married at a young age when I was a virgin, and Aisha was actually this
So a
narration of
baby
her saying that.
marrying is a boast. I mean, let's cut to the chase,
Sorry.
Mash. Are you
Baby,
saying?
not saying that.
Are
I'm not
you
saying the age.
saying? Are you
Yeah.
saying an older man in his 50s and beyond
Mhm.
marrying a 6-year-old child and consummating the marriage when she becomes 9 is acceptable for whatever reason, and you are going to even say it is even boastful. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that the age is irrelevant. Age is not relevant. Some people have argued that Aisha was boasting about the age when she herself didn't know the age. All that we do know is that yes, the nikah or engagement, basically, or marriage had been established when she was very young, but it was delayed until she was ready for marriage.
So
The age is
Mash,
on the age.
Mash, it's I'd read so details.
Sure.
6 years old child marriage, 9-year-old child sexual intercourse. Are you? I'd like to know your opinion, your thought. Are you saying this is acceptable today?
If she is ready for that, if her body is ready for that, then yes, a girl. However, if she is ready, if she hits puberty, that for me is an indication she is ready to consummate her marriage. And I don't think any
Okay,
scholar in
so
the past would argue that Aisha
that
was pre-puberty.
I think that should be clearly emphasized. You are, I mean, to me and to the rest of people who would watch. If we have daughters, I have a daughter. 6 years old child is a child. 9 years old child is a child. I don't know why you're saying if you're ready. I don't know if you have daughters, and I don't know if you've seen little girls, children, girl children, and if you're going to say 9 years a girl could be ready for sexual intercourse, I can only say I need to move on. But this is abominable.
Got it.
And I wanted to genuinely know your thoughts, and you seem to justify that, which is fairly
Will you
insulting.
permit to give me 30 seconds to answer that?
Absolutely.
Okay, then. So my point is, the age is, we don't know the age of Aisha. I'm saying that some modern scholars have argued that at that time nobody knew the age of how old they were. It was just simply a created age, and Aisha would often use that as the boast to the other way, saying that I'm a virgin, I'm the only one he did. Now, we don't know her age because we have conflicting accounts saying that she was 18.
I'm going to cut you short there. No, okay. So I mean, you might as well say no one knew who they were, and no one knew what they were doing.
Well,
I
ages, I would
mean,
say we don't know. We don't know.
no age. I can't. I mean, what changed now? With do you find that you can now get to know the age by having stopwatch? I mean,
Now people know their ages, but in the past,
technologies which were already available at that time, sun and moon and so on. So
true that, but
I can't.
people wouldn't have known their ages.
Mash, I'm going to move on.
You
Sorry,
can move on if
I
you want
don't
to.
find your answer satisfactory. You are saying you're justifying 6 years old child marrying and 9-year-old child sexually having intercourse with a much older man. I can't simply accept this.
No problem.
However
We can
you
do that.
justify, I simply can't. I need to now move on.
Okay.
Now, do you think women? I mean, do you think you can you can lust after your son's wife and marry her? Is
No.
that acceptable? Is that noble? What's
Unacceptable.
the...
No.
And so when Muhammad does that, what would you take on? Did he make a mistake? Is he not a good example? Is he a...
Can you give me more details or the reasons,
sure.
details?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, Surah 33, I think, and Ayah 37, I think. Surah 33, Ayah 37, you find that Muhammad married his adopted son's wife. You find more details of this incident in the extra literature that you have. What we find clearly, is that Tafsir Jalalin clearly says...
So you're breaking up there. Can you repeat that? Who says?
Tafsir Jalalin.
Tafsir.
Yeah. The Tafsir, the commentaries.
Tafsir, yes.
Yeah. The commentaries are very clear. Early sources, they clearly say Muhammad lusted after his adopted son's wife. I can read the text if you want. He lusted after his adopted son's wife, and that is why he wanted the adopted son to divorce the wife so he could take her in marriage. What do you consider? Is this a noble act?
I know. No, that's not.
Sure.
Shall
so
I tell
Surah
you what I think
33.
the whole account? Sorry, should I tell you?
You can tell me, but quote me sources. I don't want your personal opinion right now. My only person. I mean, in regards to the historical details, I don't want your personal opinion. In regard to historical details, I need the historical sources. But on top of the historical details, once we have established the details of what happened, then I'd like to know your opinion on that.
Got it. So this account is not recorded in any of the 6 authentic or 7 authentic hadith collections, if you include Malik's Muwatta as well. It's recorded in many later hadith sources, primarily in the Tarikh of Tabari. In fact, you can buy this voluminous thing, and this account is, in fact, three accounts of this in the Tarikh of Tabari, the history of Tabari. I think it's in volume 8, perhaps. The translators, which are done by Western academics, have looked at each of the accounts and seen that all of the narrated accounts, the isnad, the chain of narrations, are weak and fabricated. And this is important because, especially for Tabari himself, writes in his introduction to his history, saying that I have recorded everything I have heard with the change of narration for later on people to disregard whatever they wish or accept whatever they wish. So my answer to you is this whole account of him lusting after Zainab bin Josh and seeing her, his first cousin, whom he had practically grown up with, seeing her suddenly and falling in love with her, is disregarded by pretty much 99% of Muslims now, and many Muslims in the past as well. They've all completely disregarded it.
Okay,
Yeah.
I need to cut you short there, Mash.
Go for it.
I mean, you said these are reported only in late sources.
hmm
Let me be clear. All of Islam that you follow today are from late sources. None of them come from the first couple of centuries of the time of Muhammad, who supposed Muhammad's time.
Malik's
So
Muwatta is first
all of
century.
these are late sources. So let's not, and therefore my intention, I'd like to suggest to us today, not to give an explanation, not to find out who is blacker. Everything is black. So we might as well give up on Islam on this on this one point.
Well, Arul,
Give up
for
on Islam.
example,
But
Malik's
if you're
Muwatta.
going to consider any late source, I'd like to consider all late sources, which is what I'm doing right now. And okay, so there we find the motivation. We find that Muhammad lusted after Zaid's, the adopted son's wife. He lusted and then got him to divorce her and then married her. Even if you ignore that for a moment, and let's just stick to the early source, namely the Quran, Surah 33, Ayah 37, clearly tells us Muhammad married his adopted son's wife. So let me put it, minimally speaking, will you ever marry your son's wife?
I'll answer that now. So, firstly, we have early sources like Malik's Muwatta within 100 years. But second, regarding the Quranic account here, what the Quran has is it explicitly gives a list of people whom you cannot marry. So, my son's wife, I have a son, I have 3 children. Can I marry their wives? The moment they have a nikah with any woman, I am forbidden to marry her. If my son marries a girl and divorces that girl, I am still forbidden to marry that girl. If he dies and that girl still outlives him, I am forbidden to marry her. Very explicit in the Quran and in all the tafsirs and in the hadith collections of Al-Malik's Muwatta says so very clearly. The standard in the Bible, if you go to the Old Testament, does not have that at all. You are permitted, if your son dies or divorces, to marry the daughter-in-law. The Quran explicitly says you cannot do that. So I'm curious to what your standards are. Now, adopted son in Islam, it is not a blood relation. So therefore, if another person who lives in my house whom I have adopted, which is not really considered to be an Islamic custom, she's not a blood relation. He is not, that person, adopted son, is not my blood relation. We are permitted, provided they divorce. But when you say adopted or your son's
you
wife,
misquoted the
you can't
Quran.
do that.
Mash, you misquoted the Quran.
Which part did I misquote?
I'm going to read the text for you. Like we said, Muhammad married his adopted son's wife, i.e., son's wife.
Yes.
Now, you said the Quran is very noble. It forbids you from marrying your son's wife. Wrong.
Correct. Son's wife.
I'm going
Yes.
to read. I'd like you to quote the verse for me when you make any point. I'm going to read the verse where there is details of who you can marry, who you cannot marry.
Okay.
Surah 4, Ayah 23. Forbidden to you are your mothers, daughters, sisters, paternal aunts, maternal aunts, brothers, daughters, sisters, daughters, nursing mothers, nursing siblings, mother-in-laws, and stepdaughters from the women in your household with whom you have cohabited. That is the key part. With whom you have cohabited. And if you have not cohabited with them, then there is no sin against you and your daughter-in-laws, and that you should keep 2 sisters.
And the wives of your sons from your loins. So
If you have cohabited, this is a very weird, I mean, you might as well say.
If you have basically, in other words, saying if you have sex.
Let me clarify my question.
Sorry.
Let me. The Quran, Surah 4, Ayah 23 clearly says, it gives a list of who you can't marry, and then it clearly adds the main caveat: if you have cohabited. In other words, If they had lived elsewhere, your mothers, your daughters, your sisters, paternal aunts, maternal aunts, whoever, all these close relatives, if they had lived elsewhere, not in your house, you can marry them. Abominable sexual practice. So no wonder Muhammad, and of course, Surah 33, Ayah 37, very clearly Muhammad marrying his adopted son's wife, i.e., son's wife. Abominable in my view. Let me ask you this question. Are you saying Surah 4, Ayah 23, if you do not cohabit, you can marry them? Are you happy with that? You can marry your daughter, stepdaughter, anyone, as long as they didn't cohabit with you. Is that fine?
One second. If we look at
Absolutely.
the Arab, let's go into the Arabic.
But I really like to be, I'm halfway
no.
through.
The Arabic,
Yep.
I don't know, your cohabiting is not the case. It is dakhaltum, whom you have had relations with, i.e. sexual relations with. So this cohabiting, living, that would be quite absurd, Arul, because obviously I cannot, if my mother or my sister does not live in my house, are you interpreting saying that I'm allowed to marry her? I don't think you'll find
I'm not interpreting
Muslim
anything.
who
I'm
would
just
say
reading
that.
your text.
Well, you're reading a text in a very dodgy translation, I would say. It is
okay. Let me take another translation.
Means whom you have gone in into.
Pickthall's translation, very reputable.
No, it doesn't have to be. If I would suggest, Arul, go into an interlinear corpus where you can.
No. Before we do that, Mash. So, forbidden to you are your mothers, your daughters, your sisters, your father's sisters, your mother's sisters, your brothers, and so on, and who are under your protection of your women to whom you have gone in.
Yeah, so whom you have relations with. So you can't.
No, to whom you have gone in. But if you have not gone into them, then it is no sin for you. What is that not gone in? Who is that?
So wait a second. Wait, what are we reading? So forbidden to you are your mothers, your daughters, your sisters. So he's listing a bunch of people, and so your stepdaughters, who are your wards by your wives, whom you have gone into. So who are the stepdaughters, i.e., whom are your wives, whom you have had sex with? Okay, but if somebody has an engagement with a woman, does not sleep with her, that engagement breaks, her daughter is permitted for him to marry. Does that make sense?
Yeah. In other words, you can marry your son's wife.
No, it's the son's wife comes afterwards, and the wives of your sons from your loins. It is forbidden for you to marry them. It says it right in the next sentence.
You can even marry your daughter. You can marry your sisters, your mother's sisters, your brother's daughters.
I would just recommend for the readers and Arul as well, just read the text. You need to the Arabic. I don't know what translation you're using there, but
no. This is Pickthall's translation. Pickthall's translation, a very reputable translation.
You can check any commentary. No Muslim in the entire history has ever interpreted it like you have, and I'm sorry. I don't think we can talk much more about it because.
But I'm okay now. I am not interested in how people interpret. I am interested in the text itself.
And it's very clear. It says.
And in the text itself, it is very clear, and that's what I would like to ask
you. Okay, let's go into individually. Forbidden to you are your mothers. Yeah, no problem.
If you did not go in already.
Sorry.
If you did not go in. Sorry, if you had gone in already.
So that is related to your stepdaughter. So stepdaughter is if there is a girl, she has a daughter, a woman who has a daughter, I am forbidden to marry that daughter if I have slept with the woman. If I divorce the woman, I'm still forbidden to marry the daughter. If I have not slept with the woman, that girl is permitted for me to marry, which is completely fine. Because she is of no relation to me. You got to read it in context. You can't just read the top part and then suddenly apply this clause saying whom you have not gone in into. How can you say that? You forbidden to are your mothers whom you have not gone into.
Let's take one example. I'm thoroughly confused.
Okay.
Stepdaughter is in some way, shape, or form your daughter.
Correct.
In some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. How so? Can
Are,
explain.
are you saying in some circumstances you can marry her?
If I have a nikah or an engagement with a woman who has a daughter, I do not consummate the marriage and it breaks off, i.e., I have not gone in unto her.
If you did not consummate the marriage, the daughter will not be your stepdaughter.
Well, yeah, if you do the nikah,
Yeah,
then you are married.
you're married.
Exactly, you are married. She's my stepdaughter. If I have not consummated the marriage and I
How
break
does
off,
it matter? Are you saying you can get married to a lady and delay your sexual relationship with the lady for 5 more days, and then you can, in the meantime, have relationship with someone else? Is that what you say?
no.
That lady's daughters.
What I'm saying is that if I have a nikah with a woman and I delay my sexual intercourse with her for 5 days and we break off, it breaks the
It's
engagement.
not
We
here in
don't
the text.
marry.
It's not here in this text.
It says
The
here,
text is very
forbidden
clear.
to
If you
you.
haven't gone in, it isn't
Yes.
talking about whether you've broken off or not.
So
If you
forbidden
haven't
to
gone in,
you,
you can.
forbidden to you are your stepdaughters, okay, who are your wives, basically, and of the wives whom you have not gone in unto them. You cannot marry them. You can't have sex with them. You can't marry them, basically. That's what it's saying. You can't marry your mother. You can't marry your daughter. You can't marry your stepdaughter.
So,
But it's saying-
Mash. Okay, I'm not sure you're sticking to the text properly. The stepdaughter, you got married to the mother, and you're going to have, if you haven't consummated the marriage, is in your view, if you haven't gone in, then you can sleep with the stepdaughter.
No.
To me, that's
you cannot.
abominable.
I agree.
To me, that's abominable.
I completely agree. Unfortunately, I think it's your reading of the text, which no Muslim in the entire world reads
So please read this text for me. Stepdaughter.
Okay, let's skip the middle part. Forbidden to
Stepdaughter
you.
of your women to whom you have gone in, you can't marry. You can't
Yes, exactly.
take
There you
for
go.
yourself.
You said it right. You cannot marry them.
Yeah, but if you haven't gone in yet, you can.
Yeah, but then you cannot marry a woman and her child.
Well, that's your idea. I don't want your idea. I'm reading the text here.
Well, it says here, your
The text
stepdaughter.
is clear. If you haven't gone in, so the lady is married to you, but you haven't gone in, you can take
Marry
the stepdaughter.
Okay, fair enough. Let's say hypothetically that is true. Okay.
Well, that's what the text is saying.
If that happens, then the original wife becomes your mother-in-law, which the previous sentence says explicitly.
No. The original. Okay, that's simple. You made the point for me. The original wife becomes mother-in-law.
And
who was supposed to be your wife is now your mother-in-law.
And it says there, the mother of your wives are forbidden. So your reading is unfortunately it's incorrect. It's completely incorrect.
No, okay. So I leave it to the audience, and I like to move on right now. I leave it to the audience. Surah 4, Ayah 23 clearly tells me that you can take in your stepdaughter as long as you haven't gone in to the mother yet. Now, again, adopted son's wife. Are you happy with that? Are you happy? Do you think you would ever take your son's wife as your wife in any condition?
Adopted son who is not my relation, or son, my real son? Be
well,
clear.
One would hope when you adopt, you're really trying to make him your son. That's one. I mean, okay. So in other words, I don't draw that distinction at all. In my view,
I would say,
unless you have malicious intent already, I would hope that your adopted son is your son.
So the Quran permits us, if I have an adopt a son and he divorces the girl, I am permitted to marry her, just like the Torah has the same, does not prohibit that either. So the Torah prohibits a whole list of people, and the adopted one is not in there.
No, if you're going, I don't want you to make flippant comments about the Torah if you're not going to quote any reference.
I will ask you that in your talk then.
Completely disagreed. During your time to challenge me, you can
I will
quote.
Do that. I will
you
do
can
that,
quote, and we can go through. Okay, fine. Now, so in other words, a 6-year-old child, 9-year-old child, perfectly fine. Adopted son's wife, perfectly fine under circumstances. Stepdaughter, perfectly fine under circumstances. What are we dealing with here? We are really dealing with a sexual abomination. Let's move on to triple talaq. Triple talaq, halala marriage. What is your take on them?
If I want,
Just for viewers who are watching, who may not
go
be
on.
familiar, triple talaq is where you completely undermine the institution of marriage, where you just say talaq, 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 gone. Your wife is no longer your wife. That is official divorce. I'd like to know, Mash, would you accept that to be official divorce, which is what the Quran says? And then number two, if a wife is divorced in this particular manner, then if you want to retake that wife needs to have a temporary sexual relationship, which is what is called halala marriage, which is really essentially sexual relationship with another man and then return to the first man, which is again an abomination. What do you think about these two, Mash?
I complete abominations. I would love to know the Quranic reference of triple talaq, please.
Sure. Okay, let's go Surah 2, Ayah 229.
239, eh? 239.
Yeah. So no, Surah 2, Ayah 229.
Oh, 229.
229.
Let's go to
Divorce must be pronounced twice, and then then a woman must be retained in honor or released in kindness. So must be pronounced twice. The third time it is pronounced, it's official divorce. She has to leave. And it is not lawful for you that you take from women anything of that which you have given them, except when both fear that they may not be able to keep within the limits. So that's triple talaq.
Are you able to read the whole verse, please?
Yeah, Surah 2, Ayah 2. Surah 2, Ayah 2.
I'll read the verse.
Sure.
So basically, okay then. So the verse before, I guess it's good to have a bit of context. The verse before talks about divorced women shall wait concerning themselves for 3 courses, and it is not lawful for them to conceal what Allah has in it. So if you can't divorce, if they've got a pregnant, then they need to reveal that, and then the husband can and then they can reconcile. Such divorce may be pronounced twice, and either retain them in a becoming manner or send them away. And it is not lawful for you to take anything what you have given from them unless you both fear the observed limits. But if you fear that you cannot prescribe from them, okay then. So these are the limits prescribed. So here I don't see anything about a triple talaq. As you know, elsewhere in the Quran, the prescribed period of waiting, the 3 courses is a month. So if I want to divorce in Islam, I will have to say to my wife, I divorce you. I then have to wait a month. Next month comes, I say again to her, I divorce you.
Mash, I'm going to cut you short there.
Go for it.
I like your ideas. Well, I actually don't like your ideas also. But I don't like that kind of divorce also. But that's not what we're talking about. I am talking about the Quranic idea. We're talking about Quran versus Bible, not Mash versus Arul.
No. Okay, go on.
Quran is very clear. You were really correct in pointing out women when they are divorced. There's a 3 months waiting period. True, except if the divorce has been pronounced thrice. 2 times, that is still the case. The 3rd time it's pronounced, you have to release her. You have to release her. In other words, it's instantaneous. What does the word pronounce mean? Well, vocal pronunciation. Now, if there is any other meaning, you need to clarify that from the text itself. Divorce must be pronounced twice, and then the woman must be retained in honor or released in kindness. And it is not lawful for you to take from women anything of which you have given them. So the waiting period doesn't apply here. Are you saying, in other words, the text is simple, Mash. Quick question. Are you saying you can just say talaq, 3 pronunciations? The woman and the man unilaterally pronounces 3 times, divorced, divorce, divorce, talaq, 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 and then he can release her. Are you happy with this divorce?
No, because I remember there's explicit hadith that forbid this as well. If you
the Quran is very clear. Please stick to the text of the Quran here.
If we can read on, the other verses talk about a prescribed period that there must be an appointed period. You can't just say talaq, talaq, talaq. If you read verse, for example,
where do you find that out? Where do you find the period?
So if you read on chapter 2, if you read chapter 231, and when you divorce your wives and they approach the end of their period, the appointed period. So this is not there is no appointed period for talaq, talaq, talaq. There is, and it talks further, next verse.
Mash, no, you're doing injustice to the text.
Okay, go on.
I agree. There is an appointed period in verse 2 to 8. In ayah 2 to 8, there is an appointed period. So when you divorce, there is an appointed period. Clearly, 3 months, 3 periods, 3 courses. So 3 months, let's say.
Yes.
But ayah 2 to 9 is an exception. Gives details of an exception. And the exception is, but if you pronounce 2 times plus 1, the third time, then it's instantaneous. It must be retained in honor or release. Must be. As long as the pronunciation. Now, this is an exception, which is what is norm in the triple talaq case. Now, when you move on to 231, you're still talking about what is described in 228, not the exception. In 229, there is no period. In 228, ayah 228, there is a period. 229, there's no period. So I'm going to ask the question again, and then I'm going to make my comment and move on. Are you saying you can pronounce divorce 3 times unilaterally and that's it? The woman is gone.
No.
That's what the text says.
I would suggest you read the context of the text. You need to read the verses. The context. Okay. No, I'm saying for the readers as well. They can check the verses 2 to 9 up until the next 4 verses, and it very explicitly says it that there is a period between each pronouncement, and this is a beauty that you can't just divorce like that. It takes a long period for the people to think about it. That's my final answer.
I need to move on. Sorry. Yeah, apologies. Yeah. Okay, now but people can read the text. 2 to 9 is an exception. There is no period specified. 3 pronouncements, the wife is gone. Now, halala marriage. Ayah 230. You divorce.
Which surah? Which surah?
Same surah. The text, the verse in between. 230. If he has divorced her the third time, if he has divorced her, then she is not lawful to him after that until she has wedded another husband.
Correct.
So you've done triple talaq. The lady ought to be now released. When if you need to take the lady back, she has to marry. She has to be wedded to another husband. As long as she is wedded to another husband, then if the other husband divorces her, it is no sin for both of them that they come together again. So my simple point is, halala marriage practice is prevalent. 3 divorce lady goes through a temporary marriage to then come back to the old husband. Is this a good practice, noble practice? What do you think? Halala marriage.
What I'm saying here is, if divorce is not taken lightly in Islam, and those who just divorce and then remarry, divorce, you can't do that. Islam, divorce is lawful, but it is the most hated thing inside of God according to the hadith. So you can't take it lightly.
No. Please stick to the Quranic verse that I quoted, Mash. Again, right? Please. You need to. The debate is very specific. Quran versus Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to stick to the text that I quoted. Surah 2, Ayah 230. Please don't give me details which is not here. Very clear. Divorce, 3 pronunciation, 229, gone. 230, a woman who is gone in this manner can't be taken back. Temporary marriage, you can have her back. This is what the text says. Are you happy with this text?
No, I am, but I'm not happy with your reading of the text. I'm happy.
So read it in any other way, but stick to the text, please.
The readings is, and as we discussed before, the period is not talaq, talaq, talaq. It is over a period of 3 months. Very serious. You cannot just divorce after 3 months and then change your mind, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I want to marry again." No, the Quran says you have to be taken seriously. The woman has to move on, basically. And if she marries to another husband, fine, tough luck for you. But if she divorces that husband, you are permitted to ask her hand again. But you cannot just say, I divorced you, and then I wait after 3 months, come back and say, I made a mistake. That's what the Quranic account.
So, Mash, okay. So, triple talaq, the lady leaves. If you want to take her back, you simply can't.
Correct. You can't.
You said there are 3 months period. I don't see that in verse 230. We disagree on the text. People can read the text.
Yes.
So women fancy of the man, a lady might be gone, but if he wants to take back, he can't. She has to be married to someone else before he can take back. Abomination, in my view. Now let's try and summarize. I think we only have maybe a couple of more minutes. So we my simple point is I like to show my simple point is, by virtue of the fact that 4 wives 1 man, by virtue of fact that you can beat your women are treated like a land that can be irrigated. Women don't have a good place. More men in heaven, most men in hell. Women are not respected. You quoted an example of Khadija. She is the only lady who enjoyed a monogamous relationship with Muhammad, but this is pre-Islam. Khadija was a wife pre-Islam. Post-Islam, Muhammad had a very abominable relationship with others. Please clarify if this is not the case, but quote the text. You can beat women, like I said. Now, in relation to the institution of marriage, it's not age appropriate. 6 years old baby, child, 9 years old child, sexual intercourse. Stepdaughter, daughter-in-law, you can have, under some circumstances, whatever, you can marry. You triple talaq, at women fancy, you can divorce, and then if you need to take back, abomination, you let other people sleep with her. Please, in 10 seconds, what did I get wrong?
About 99% of that.
But from the text, please.
We went through the text, and I'm happy with my reading, and I think most readers out there can read it as well. They'll see that I don't think you had a correct understanding or a correct reading of the text at all. I invite people just to read it and just read it for themselves. Boom, there you go.
Okay, cool. I'd like people to read the text and see who they agree with. Thank you, Matt, for that.
Yeah, so I just want to be fair and make sure I pull it straight down the middle there. So thank you both. Great discussion. So now we're going to flip it back over now, where it's Arul's turn to defend, and Mashid will cross-examine.
Awesome.
So
thank you very much.
In your own time.
So yeah, I mean, I'll let the readers decide. I think we went through a couple of examples there. You saw Arul's understanding of the Quranic text, and sadly, I think it is incorrect. And based on that reading, you can kind of make the Quran say whatever you want it to say. And so I invite him to read the very rest of the parts as well, where the accusations come through. None of them are founded. But when it comes to the Bible, I'm really curious to know what Arul thinks. Now, he explicitly said that we must compare the Islamic text to the biblical text. And I'm very glad, Arul, that you brought in the Old Testament as well, because a lot of Christians will run away from the Old Testament. But as you say, it was revealed by God, the triune God, the Father and the Son as well. So I want to bring those examples as well. But I liked the fact that you said that man and woman are equal. For my reading of this, especially, for example, the book of Timothy, let's listen to the New Testament, where whoever the author was, he says quite explicitly, I would have thought, I think, that they are not equal. And woman, in fact, it talks about Eve. The reason why women should learn in silence and submissiveness, they can't teach. And the reason the author gives is because Eve, Adam's wife, was the one who was deceived, not Adam. She was the transgressor. And this has been used. So I would like to know your interpretation of that text. Would you like me to get the reference? I think you know the reference, right, Timothy? The book of Timothy,
yeah. So your particular question is that
the author,
why do I consider these men and women to be equal given this particular verse?
Yes.
Is that your question?
So where it says explicitly they are not equal, and woman was created from man for man, as well. Paul says that elsewhere as well. She is to be saved by childbirth, and the blame is not on Adam, but the blame is on his wife, Eve. She was the transgressor.
Sure. Okay. So let's define the word equal very properly. Now, you are Mash, I am Arul. I am not Mash, you're not Arul. Just because there are differences, can we say that you are better than me or I am better than you? No.
No.
If you go to any typical workplace, you may have managers, managers, and in our nation we have prime minister, ministers, the police, and all sorts of different people in authority. Just because roles are different, it does not mean inherently people are unequal. And so my definition of equality is very similar. God's definition is also very similar. At creation, Adam was there, and then God created Eve, the woman from Adam, and he made a remarkable comment. He said, this woman is going to be a helper comparable to the man. Two crucial words: helper, comparable. Helper meaning some things Adam couldn't do, which the woman was going to do. She was going to help him. Helper. Comparable, that's God's view. Roles are different.
Helper fit for him. That's what the text says. Is that right?
Helper comparable is the literal word for word translation. If you want word for word translation for biblical texts, I recommend King James version if you want, but New King James if you're not very happy with archaic English. Word for word translation. Helper comparable. I can quote the verse for you if you want. Yeah, this is clearly Genesis
2:18, right?
And Genesis chapter 2, verse 18.
Yep. I will make him a helper for him.
Nope. Genesis
I'm not
chapter
worried
2,
about that one,
verse 18.
I'm more interested in what Paul says, where Paul says in Timothy.
I am more interested in what God says. This is the thing. Let's begin. I'm now Paul wasn't there at creation. Paul didn't set the purpose.
I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about this text. This text.
No. I come to clarify what Paul says. Okay, maybe long story short.
Go on,
long story short, very simply put, Paul in the epistle to Timothy, the first one, I believe, clearly points out that between a man and a woman, the roles are different. He clearly points that out. And he also gives clarification that even inherently our physical nature, emotional build between a man and a woman, and this is quite scientific. We don't even have to argue about this.
I get that.
Paul isn't the source. Paul doesn't have to be the source of this information. A man versus a woman, in an average case, the build-up of these people are different. Those are the only things Paul talks about.
Can I read what I want to read? In fact, I can probably read. I want to read what Paul says. So that
let's read.
So verse 1 Timothy, chapter 2, verse 11.
Sure.
I want the readers to hear this. Arul, I want you to be honest. Does this sound like man and woman are equal?
Absolutely. Let's read.
A woman learn in silence with all submissiveness. I permit no woman to teach or to have authority over man. She is to keep silent. For Adam was formed first and then Eve. Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became the transgressor. Let woman be saved through bearing children, if she continues in faith and love and holiness with modesty. To me, that sounds like women are pretty bad. They were the first transgressors. They deceived man. That's what the early church fathers agreed as well with. Man has authority over them, and they are to be saved through bearing children. That's their role in society for Paul. I would like your comment on that, please.
I mean, before I respond, I'd like to briefly. You said women deceived. You implied the woman deceived Adam. I don't see that in this text.
Implying
I don't see this
14.
in this. I don't see that in this text. Where do you find that?
Verse 14.
Does it say the woman deceived Adam?
Adam was deceived but the woman was deceived. Oh, the woman was
Yeah,
deceived,
the
and
woman was deceived.
she became the transgressor.
Yeah. The
Same.
woman was deceived, but it
And
doesn't
she
say the
became
woman deceived Adam.
Okay,
That's a
but
different.
no, she became deceived and she became the transgressor. So Adam wasn't the transgressor, Eve was the transgressor according to the author. And she's to be saved through childbearing. So that
So
doesn't sound
once
like
again,
equality.
do we agree? Do we agree? All that the lady did here was fail. She didn't maliciously deceive anyone. Do we agree?
She, according to this text, Adam wasn't deceived. She became the transgressor. What does that mean,
Yeah. She
transgressor?
got deceived. She fell into transgression. She fell into transgression before God. She ate the fruit which she is supposed not to have eaten. She didn't have malicious intent. She just was gullible. That's all that the text is saying. You know
To be
what
a
deception is.
transgressor is what is that what you think basically?
Well, we have Genesis. This is where I wanted to go to Genesis if you want. Simple point is the woman genuinely thought she could eat, despite the fact that God had said you can't eat. So she genuinely was confused and was gullible and thought this serpent guy, the devil guy, was telling her the truth.
So
In other words, she didn't. The Bible never presents the woman as someone who was malicious in intent. If
it's a
you're going
nice
to say
way of
that,
putting it's a nice way of putting it. You're right, but I
no,
mean
no,
Paul
read
is
the text
very
there.
explicit.
Please read the text
She
there. No,
she was
read the
this
text there.
transgressor.
It says Adam was not deceived. We agree.
Yeah.
Eve, the woman, was deceived. We agree. She was gullible.
And
She got
became
deceived.
the
And then
transgressor.
fell into transgression. What does fell into transgression mean? She ate, ended up eating what she was not supposed to eat.
Yeah, so the
None of
blame
these
is on
refer to
her.
malicious intent
But what's the
from the
context?
woman.
The context is I don't permit a woman to teach or have authority over man. She is to
Okay,
remain
I'll come
silent.
back. I can come there. I can come there if you want. Just
Go
to
on
quickly correct, if you say the Bible attributes malicious intent to the woman, that is inaccurate. I'd like you to present evidence for that. Now the context is very clear. I can give you. I mean, just for simplicity, I can give you another example. I was a student long time ago. I was in primary school, secondary school, higher secondary school, and then university, bachelor's degree, master's degree. And I knew very well right the way through, especially the younger I was, I had to learn in silence. I had to learn in silence. I didn't know my stuff, but the person who was standing in front of me, namely the teacher, lecturer, depending on which institution we were talking about, school or university, the lecturer or teacher, science, mathematics, whoever, they knew better. So I better learn in silence. This only describes the role.
And the woman can't
The
teach.
difference in role, let me clarify, difference in role between me and the person who I wanted to learn from. Nothing to do with suggesting, even faintly, that I was lower than the teacher. No Tom, Dick, and Harry would even read the text like that. And so my point simply is, Mash, the Bible is very clear repeatedly. Roles are different. Islam, like I said earlier, is very nasty. Four wives, one very nasty, one husband, very nasty. Islam is a degraded version of a woman. In contrast, here in the Bible, you find one wife, one husband, equal, helper, comparable. Roles are different because the emotional makeup is different, the physical makeup is different. I'm quite happy with the roles being different. I gave you another example. In my previous workplaces, I had managers.
We're good. We're good there. For me, I think we can move on to the next bit because I'm going to read
Sure.
the biblical text again.
Do we agree to say that text talks anything more than roles and is talking about inherent inequality? Is plain simply very, very inaccurate.
Let's read the text.
Reading of that text.
Let woman learn in silence with all submissiveness. I permit no woman to teach. She can't teach a man. If a man wants to learn, he must go to a man. A woman cannot teach or to have authority over man. A woman cannot have the teacher and student authority over man. She is to keep silent. Why? Because Adam was formed first, then Eve. Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became the transgressor. Yet woman will be saved through bearing children. That is
Sure.
Paul's message. I let
Sure.
the readers can read that for themselves. I have not.
No, let me
misquoted
respond to that.
Boom.
Let me just respond to
Go
that
on.
very
Quickly
clearly.
respond and we move on then.
Quick response, and then we can move on. I am a Christian with a traditional view on scriptures. I believe in the father being the head of the family. I'm not ashamed about this. I believe in the father leading the family, men taking up teaching role. I'm quite happy with that. That's Christian doctrine. But I see this not as inequality, but difference in roles, quite understandably, as scriptures puts it, and as we know from science, because of how the emotional make the difference in makeup between a man and a woman is on an average case. A man is supposed to be more stable in interpreting complex things and so on. In an average case, this is how the Bible presents. We find this in science. How the emotional makeup and so on are very different.
I completely agree with all of that. I just don't agree
Different
with
roles, equal, men and women.
Okay, let's move on.
Sure.
So you talked a lot about how in Islam it's abominable to marry your adopted son who isn't your relation. If he divorces his wife, you can marry her. That's quite disgraceful and stuff like that. I looked into it and I looked at the Torah. I looked at all the prohibited people whom you cannot marry. And just to note, I'll let the readers decide. It's if you have an adopted son, they get divorced, there's that prohibition is not there. In fact, you have a very funny teaching. In fact, it's called the case of Yibn, where, in fact, I'll read the text. Let me read the text. If brothers dwell together, and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the dead shall not be married outside his family to a stranger. Her husband's brother should get married to her. So the girl has to or should marry the brother-in-law if her husband dies, and he is to take care of and become the husband. If the man refuses, it's quite funny, verse 7 talks about, if the man does not wish to take the brother's wife, then the brother's wife shall go to the gate of the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to perpetuate his brother's name in Israel. He will not perform his duty as a husband. The elders will call him and speak to him, and if he persists and says, no, I don't want to marry her. I see her like a sister. Like I see my sister-in-law as a sister. And he says, I don't want to do it. Then the brother's wife shall go to him in front of everybody, the elders. She'll take his sandal off his foot, and then she'll spit in his face. And she will answer and say, so shall it be done to you, who does not build his brother's house. And then that's it. And then the name of the house should be called in Israel, the house of him that had his sandal pulled off. This is a very amusing text for me. Arul, do you advocate this? If you are living with your brother and he is married, and then God forbid he dies, you have to marry your sister-in-law, and if you don't, she will steal your sandal and spit in your face in front of everybody. Do you advocate? That's God's teaching. Can you explain that?
Mash, it's very peculiar. You made many references and asked only one question.
This is one passage. This is just the one.
Yeah, many details, and then you're going to ask only one question. I'd really like to stick to.
I'm just saying that I read the whole. Okay. I read the context, and I said, "Do you agree with this?"
But before, can I quickly comment? So you said the relationship inappropriateness. You said apparently it's in the Torah also.
Deuteronomy 25 verses 5 to 9. It talks about an incident where a wife, if her husband dies and he has a brother, this is what happens. If she must marry the brother, and if she doesn't,
she must. Where do you find that? She must.
Her husband, verse 5.
Wait, sorry, which one? Sorry. So,
Deuteronomy 25. Yeah, it says she must, but the guy can refuse. So verse 5, Deuteronomy 25, verse 5, if brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the dead man shall not be married outside of the family to a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go in to her, i.e., marry her. But if he refuses, like I think most people would refuse, she will steal a sandal and spit in his face, and from there onwards, that person will be known as the house who has had his sandal pulled off. Disgraceful, that is. This is the one passage. It's not many points. It is one incident passage, an instruction from Jesus, God. Please tell me, are you content with that? And would you marry your brother's wife if God forbid he dies? Arul.
Yeah. I mean, I'm amused, Mash. I mean, I can't believe that you're comparing your daughter, who is supposed to be your daughter, stepdaughter, or adopted son's wife, daughter-in-law,
Unrelated,
your daughter.
yes. Completely unrelated.
Yeah, I'm answering. I'm sorry. So to try and marry your daughter would be an abomination.
I agree.
But to try, you don't know. I'm not asking you whether you agree right now.
Oh,
I'm saying the Quran advocates that, and that would be an abomination. Now, are you comparing brothers? You know, if you take my brother, I don't have a brother, but let's say a 2-year-old gentleman who was born with me, a sibling, an older brother I have, which I don't have, but let's say I have. If he had a wife, that lady, for all intents and purposes, if he hadn't married that lady, I could have married. I'm assuming you would agree with this. That lady is not a young child, 6-year-old, 9-year-old. No, that lady is an adult lady, and she is as far removed from me genetically as she is removed from my brother. So if my brother could marry her, I could marry her. If I had seen her before my brother, I could have married her.
True
So
that, but you're living together with your brother.
Once again, let me finish. Very easily interchangeable candidates. Now, the Bible is very clear, and that is when when two people are married, when one of them dies, clearly the marriage is annulled. One of them dies. Note that carefully. You don't lust after and ask them to divorce. The person dies. And when the person dies, who could have legitimately been a candidate for you anyway, now is an unmarried lady because her husband has died. And so she's still a legitimate candidate. But like I said, like you rightly pointed out, you can, for whatever reason, reject. You can say, no, I don't want to do this. And there are legitimate ways in which you could do this. And so I find this amusing that you're comparing this with marrying your
daughter. To reply to that, the Leviticus, in the instructions in Leviticus of who you can marry and who you cannot marry are very similar to the Quran. In fact, the Quran is more stricter. In the Bible, in Leviticus, and if you want to go into the texts again, this is Leviticus 18 to 20, it lists the people who you cannot marry. And in there, if your son gets married to a girl and they get divorced, you can marry her. In Islam, you cannot do that.
Sorry, come again, please. What was the last part?
So in Leviticus, if your son gets married to a girl and they get divorced, the marriage is annulled. In Leviticus, in the biblical law, in the UK law, every other law, you can marry that girl. You can marry your mother-in-law if you divorce your wife. In the biblical strong, you cannot do that in the Quranic account. Once you marry a girl, her relatives become forbidden to you forever.
I'm a bit confused, Mash. The Quran is the one which says. The Quran is the one. I'm a bit confused because you're seriously misrepresenting what you just read from Leviticus. So let me clarify. The Quran is the one which clearly says it is lawful for you to marry your son's wife. It is lawful. So the Quran clearly suggests that is valid.
We've gone through that.
The Quran is also clear. The Quran is also clear that you can marry your stepdaughter. Yeah, some conditions, or who cares? You can marry your stepdaughter. The Quran is the one which is spreading this abomination. In contrast, when you come to Leviticus chapter 18, it clearly says,
list, can you tell me where
No,
on
no,
this
no.
whole
Wait,
list?
wait, 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 wow, 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 wow. Wait.
Okay, go on.
You are saying, if you said this is a whole list, I'd like to comment to you that you don't know how the Torah works. Who can you marry? Who can't you marry?
Fair
Is
enough.
spread across multiple passages
No, okay,
in the Bible.
Arul.
But if you want to stick to this particular verse,
No,
what does
Arul,
it
tell me
say?
this. Tell me this.
It clearly
Tell me this.
says, "You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's brother. You shall not approach his wife. She is your aunt. You shall not." It's only giving negatives. You can't. It's not giving an entire list, but only some negatives. And it
Fair
says,
enough.
"You
Okay,
shall
okay.
not uncover the nakedness of your brother's wife." It's your brother's nakedness. "You shall not uncover the nakedness of a woman and a
Stop
daughter."
there. No. Your brother's wife.
Woman
Your
and
brother's wife.
a daughter.
You can uncover the nakedness. You have to uncover the nakedness of your brother's wife if your brother dies. Correct, Arul?
If, like I explained to you very clearly, dying annuls marriage.
No problems. Fine.
Lusting and asking for divorce is a very different case.
Let's stick to the biblical text. We are talking to the
Let's,
Bible text now.
so the daughter-in-law, where in verse 17, what does it say? "You shall not uncover the nakedness of a woman and her daughter." Stepdaughter, no.
No problems. And we agree.
Nor shall you take your son's daughter.
No. Stop.
Nor shall you take your son's daughter.
Hey,
So
Arul,
where do you get the idea that Bible advocates this?
My question here is very clear. It says there, "You shall not uncover the nakedness of your brother's wife." Okay. Elsewhere in the Bible text, it says, if your brother dies, then you should marry her. If you don't marry her, she will steal your sandal and spit in your face, and you will be called a man with one sandal. Now, this means clearly that you cannot marry your brother's wife. You cannot sleep with her while they are married.
Mash, I can't believe you're making this point.
Is that not the case? Am I wrong there?
No.
No, am I not
Clearly,
wrong? I'm wrong there.
You're clearly wrong. I'll clarify why you're wrong.
Explain.
I have made this point multiple times. I can repeat this one more time.
Brother's wife.
Brother's wife. When the brother dies, the marriage is annulled. She is not your brother's wife anymore. She is not a brother's wife anymore. She is a single lady. The marriage is annulled.
Okay.
Now,
continue.
So it's not contradictory. Now, and it's not suggesting that you need to stay in marriage without relationship. That's not the case. Now, come to verse 17 where you started. Verse 17. You cannot have a woman and her daughter. Having both is insane.
Exactly.
And then it goes on. You cannot have your son's daughter. So clearly the Quran is polar opposite to the Bible here. You simply can't have your son's daughter.
Okay, stop for a sec. I'm gonna interrupt here. I'm gonna go through.
Sure.
The verse very clearly says you cannot have you should not cover the nakedness of your brother's wife. Now we know that because you can't do that. If they're married, you can't do that. If the brother dies, you can do that. Correct or not?
According to the Bible, if the brother dies, according to the Quran, my problem was in regard to the Quran, when your son is still alive, he hasn't died.
Let's stick to the text.
I mean, even if he had died, it doesn't matter. That's still your daughter.
Stick to the text. Stick to the text now. Biblical text. Your brother's wife, if he dies, you can marry her. According to this text, your son's wife, if your son dies, can you marry her?
Your son's wife? No.
Where does it say that in the text? You cannot do that. Your brother's wife, if your brother dies, you can marry her. You will have to marry her. In the same text, in the same phrase, it says you must not uncover the nakedness of your son's wife. But if your son dies, where does it say you cannot marry her? The Quran.
Very good question, Mash.
Perfect.
I'm quite glad you asked this. Very good question. I completely understand what you're saying. They are equivalent phrases. So why doesn't the equivalence apply when he's dead?
Please.
Thank you very much. The problem is this. In the Quran, you find positive affirmation. You can. Muhammad, I'm answering right now. The contrast is very important. In the Quran, The positive affirmation. So it doesn't matter whether there is any other text anywhere else which gives more details. I don't care. You can marry your son's wife. Abominable. Can.
Right.
The moment you have one statement, you know it is possible.
We've
Here,
gone through that.
like I said clearly, I completely agree. If we stick to the equivalence of phrases, this text will not help you understand what should happen when your son dies. I completely understand. But that is where I'd like to suggest to you, Mosaic Torah is not just here, it is the entire first 5 books, number one. And number two, give me one example of a godly man who was commended for marrying his son's wife in the Bible.
Let me ask. Okay. The claim of absence does not prove it. I've given you a very explicit example here. The Bible says in the same instructions, a whole bunch, you can't marry your mother-in-law. You can't marry your daughter-in-law. You cannot marry your sister-in-law. But if your brother dies, you have to marry your sister-in-law. Otherwise, you get spit in your face and you walk around with one sandal. In the same phrase, if your wife dies, you can marry your mother-in-law. If your son dies, you can marry your son-in-law.
Where do you find that?
It's
where is that in the text somewhere?
There
Please
is
show
no
me.
prohibition.
No, please wait. No. You just read 2 verses and you're saying there is no prohibition. Where do you find that positive affirmation in the text?
This is a list of prohibitions, and elsewhere there are other lists. Can you find?
So can you give me one example of a God? Mash, this is the problem. Mash, this is the problem. This is my problem. My problem is whenever it comes to debating Quran versus the Bible, people assume Quranic standard, cultural standard, is what is advocated in the Bible. They assume. My point simply is, if that is the case, show me one example of a godly man in scriptures who married deliberately his son's wife and God commended him for that. Show me one example. If that is one second, let me finish. If you cannot show that example, you must agree. If you cannot show that example, you must agree that as much as it would appear to be abominable for us, and therefore you don't even need an explicit instruction to say that, the Bible also ignores that case.
Can you give me an example? Okay, Arul, can you give me a couple of examples where God commends a marriage in the Bible? Go for it.
A couple of examples where God commends
a marriage, a random marriage. Give me some examples, please.
Okay. Well, in regards to marriage,
in the whole Torah, go for it. Because you're asking me some example. Give me one example. Can you give me some examples where God even commends any marriage?
Absolutely, yeah.
Which one?
For instance, Ruth, Boaz. The entire story was how Ruth was faithful and so on. Yeah, they commended Boaz.
God commended her and told her to marry.
Can I finish my answer? Sorry,
go for it.
Yeah, because you I'm assuming you think that there is no such commendation. I'm answering.
No. I'm asking.
I'm answering right now. And the answer is yes. God commends many marriages. God even gives templates for how marriages should work, and I can give you all the entire list if you want. So quick run through Ruth and Boaz.
Okay.
Quick run through the Lord Jesus Christ and the church is given as the template for how marriages should be.
Okay.
One husband, one wife. The Lord Jesus Christ and the church, who is called the bride of the Lord Jesus Christ.
We can move on.
Paul in his writings talks about who should be elders. A man who has married one woman.
Okay. So
now no one in the biblical times, in the biblical culture, would have even considered getting married to your son's wife. That would be an abomination as much as it is to us. So it is not explicitly stated as much as the Bible doesn't state. Oh, you can't marry the great grandmother who passed away a long time before you. The Bible doesn't explicitly state that.
Let's move on.
Sure. But do we understand right now that the Bible is very clear? You simply can't give an example for such an abominable behavior, which we find in the Quran.
I won't agree with that. But we move on. Let's move on. Come on.
Sure.
Was the relationship between Adam and Sarah a healthy and very godly relationship?
Between them, in some regards, yes, but not in all
Adam and
regards.
Sarah. I
No.
mean, they were blessed, right? They were blessed. Their children
Yeah.
were
But
hugely blessed.
not in all regards. Not in all regards.
Did you know that Sarah, according to the Bible, was Abraham's stepsister? They shared the same father?
Yeah.
Isn't that incest? That's even forbidden. That's even illegal over here, I think. In all nations, it's illegal. You can't do that. But your God has blessed this incestuous relationship, hasn't it?
Okay. Very interesting question, Mash. Answer is very simple.
Go.
The God of the Bible wants to bless everyone, regardless of how wicked we are. This is. Let me answer. You asked a very interesting question, Mash. I need to answer. Please listen to my answer. God of the Bible, this is the beautiful thing about him. He loves human beings. Desperate sinners, evil, wicked people, he loves and he wants them back. Receive forgiveness and be with him forever. This is the entire long story short of Christian Bible. God blessed various people, all sorts of different times, not because they were perfect, but despite them being imperfect, he blessed all sorts of different people. Now, did God find his wife? Did God find Abraham? Did God ask Abraham to marry his stepsister? No, I don't think so. You can't show me any evidence to suggest otherwise. All that I can say is, well, he happened to marry his stepsister, and this was pre-Toraic time, so he wouldn't have known what was forbidden, what was not forbidden. People can even talk about genetics and how, because he comes, about 500 years before the time of Torah, genetically they would have still be fine. As a matter of fact, Adam married his own bone, Eve. We both agree.
And
but
their children married each other as well,
genetically it's fine. So,
long story short, would have married their brother and sister,
long story short, God blessed Abraham and Sarah not because they had they had chosen wonderful couple, spouse for each other. No, not because of that. So to suggest anything otherwise,
it's a good relationship. He was a good man, right? Abraham was a good man according to God in the Bible, right?
I can't remember exactly the word "good" used in reference to Abraham. Can you suggest one verse where that expression is used?
He was blessed. He was blessed, wasn't he?
But that's a very different verse. God blesses even sinners.
Okay. Do you know?
So Abraham is not an example to me in regards to who I should get married to when. No,
I'm not an example to anybody. I think we shouldn't marry our stepsisters by our father's daughter.
No, you shouldn't marry the stepdaughter. That is the key part. Stepsister. I mean, let's put it this way. Even today there are cultures where people marry cousins. I'm sure you would be aware.
That's fine. And
cultures where people marry close cousins, first cousins. Even where today people do that. And now the point simply is, genetically it has been. I'm not saying it's good. It's terrible. Leads to all sorts of issues.
If they keep marrying within the family, then it gets pretty bad. I think one-offs aren't that bad.
Yeah, it's really genetically speaking. It's terrible. Stay away. Stay away. But having said that, in Abrahamic times, I clearly made to you the point. Abraham is not my example in regards to who I should get married to. Never in the Bible would you find that suggestion that follow Abraham's example.
I'm curious.
Muhammad is an example for you. Perfect example for all times. Marrying your stepdaughter, abominable. Abraham, God doesn't say he's an example for me in regards to marriage.
We need to finish that discussion. We had the whole discussion 45 minutes or half an hour. We need to move on from there. The readers can decide and read the text themselves.
Sure.
And the commentaries. But I want to talk about polygamy. Aaron, sorry, how much time have I got left? Is Aaron gone? Maybe gone to... No problems. Oh,
hi,
Aaron,
sorry, no, I am here. Sorry. Yep, 36.
Okay, so a question on polygamy. You have a very... you're very critical of polygamy, Arul, right?
Absolutely.
I understand. That's fine. So I found a really interesting discussion happening in Deuteronomy 21, verses 10 to 15. It says here, God is speaking. Jesus is speaking to the people and saying,
Deuteronomy 21 verses, sorry, come again, please.
10 to 15.
Sure. Okay.
So Jesus is now instructing the Israelites, the people, saying, when you go forth to war against your enemy, and the Lord your God gives them in your hands, and you take them captive. Okay, so they're going into a fight, you take them captive. And you see a beautiful woman amongst the captives, and you have desire for her. Could that be lust? Maybe. Anyway, you have desire for her, and you want to take her for yourself as your wife. Then you shall bring her home to your house, and she shall shave her head and pare her nails. And she shall be put on the captive's garb, and she remain in the house and bewail her father and her mother, who they probably killed, for a full month. And after that, then you can have sex with her, basically, and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. But then if you don't have no delight in her, you can let her go as she wills, but you can't sell her. It must be good. You can't treat her like a slave, because you've humiliated her, because you slept with her, I guess. Verse 15 is interesting. If a man has two wives, the one loved and the other disliked, and they have borne him children, both the loved and the disliked, and if the firstborn is hers, that is disliked. Here I'm curious to know if God forbade this. A question here, it seems to be God is giving an instruction to a person with two wives. I find that strange if God forbade it, because like God wouldn't tell us, hey, if you man have married, if you find a man who has married his mother and he likes his mother, he wouldn't do that. It's just forbidden. So here, and there's other texts as well in the Old Testament that seem to give instruction to people with two wives. Does that not mean that it was okay? There is no instruction to forbid it, and there's no instruction to do it. But you find examples where God is speaking about it. It's happened, and he tells you what to do in those scenarios. I find that a bit odd if it was forbidden.
Sure. Great question. But again, you're coming from a Quranic perspective, and therefore plenty of assumptions involved. I'll clarify. Number one, to suggest that the Bible doesn't have instructions or information or God's heart in knowing that one man, one wife I can give you more details if you want. To suggest that isn't there, it tells me that you don't know scriptures. The book of Genesis, the book of Malachi, New Testament documents, clearly you don't know. That's fine.
Okay.
One man, one wife is the pattern set right from the start by the God of the Bible. Now, if your point, in regards to your point right now, if your point is because it says if a man has two wives, then how to handle that? How to, for whatever instruction follows. If you are suggesting by any stretch of imagination that there God is happy with this happy with him having multiple wives, I can't believe this is happening. Because if you go through the rest of the Torah, you'll find many such expressions. If you sin, do this. If you kill, do this. If you do all sorts of evil things, do this. All sorts of, just because an expression appears in an if clause, it does not mean God is happy with what is happening there.
No.
God is only responding. God is only responding to point number one, challenge number one. Find one instruction where God is saying, I want you to go marry 2, 3, 4, which is there in the Quran, demeaning women. You won't find that in the Bible. Instruction, positive instruction from God to do that. Simply can't find. You have demonstrated that by going to a desperate place where it is talking about some if condition.
This is a discussion.
You won't find an instruction positive. You won't find a positive affirmation.
No. All I'm saying here,
all that you have found is an if clause. If this happens, then do these things.
Why?
Like
if
I
it
said,
was forbidden,
that is not
if it was
any stretch. That is not by any stretch of imagination suggesting that the man is exhorted to do that.
If Jesus forbade it, then why is he giving instructions for a scenario that he has forbidden?
Simple. God forbids sin, doesn't he? But the Bible has the Bible, if you know the Torah, Leviticus, the first couple of chapters you can read. If you commit a sin, and it gives instructions, that doesn't mean God asked them to. One second, let me finish, Mash.
Okay.
No, this is a basic point. I can't believe you're making this point.
No, I understand your point.
The Bible, the Torah has plenty of details of how to handle scenarios which God does not like. If you end up in this situation
Stop for 1
which
second.
God does not
I
like,
think
what should you do?
everybody
This,
understands that.
why
Everybody
do you see
understands
this
that.
as anything to the
Arul,
contrast?
if it was forbidden, I would expect God to say, if a man has 2 wives, he should divorce one, for this is forbidden. You should now offer sacrifice. No, it doesn't say that. It says if he has 2 wives, if he loves more than the other, and this happens, and this happens, and this happens, then this is what you need to do. There's no instruction to say, stop it, you can't do that. You can't say, for example, oh, God says, if you commit sin, do this. Of course, that's everywhere. If you commit
Sure, Mash,
sin,
I thank you for making my argument. I thank you for making
didn't
my
make your
argument.
at all.
I'm going to simply ask you, do you know of any Bible verse where God is instructing people to marry multiple wives? 2, 3, 4.
No.
There we go.
I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know what you're asking right now.
Of course. Do you know of a single verse in the Bible where God forbids somebody to marry their stepsister or their sister or their stepsister or anything like that? No, because you can't argue in the opposite.
If you want an explicit, I'll answer your question. If you want an explicit forbidding in marrying your sister, it's there.
No, we know that one. We know that one.
Leviticus chapter 20, verse 17. So it is
18,
there.
18, chapter 18. They can read them more. You can read them more. Tell me.
Yeah, multiple passages. Multiple passages.
Tell me,
you just need to find one example which you can't, which in itself demonstrates that this is simply beyond the imagination.
We can let the readers decide that what Arul is saying.
Let the listeners.
Arul is saying that God forbid.
Clear right now that you simply admitted that you can't quote one place where God of the Bible recommends 2, 3, 4 wives. Can't. Quran, on the other hand, does. And that is the point.
This is my segment. This is my answer to that.
Biblical God, although works around human imperfections and instructions around human imperfections, like how he
my time here. Do you know that? You're going into my time here. So, okay, look, you can let the listeners decide. If God forbade polygamy, my point is simply this: that if that was the case, then we would find explicit prohibitions of that, and you wouldn't find scenarios where God instructs people that if you have multiple wives, then you should do that, you should do that. Rather, it should say, if you have multiple wives, bad news, you shouldn't. You should have the one wife. The Quran limits it to 4. In fact, we find God blessing people. We find righteous, godly people, in quotes, godly, who have had hundreds of wives, and this is throughout the Old Testament. Abraham himself had multiple wives, and both were blessed. All of them are blessed. So this argument does not stand. Thank you.
Thank
Aaron.
you for the question, Mash. Let me respond to that.
Wait,
so my point simply is
just briefly, Arul, very briefly. Then okay, then we've got to wrap up.
Yeah, very briefly. God of the Bible sets a pattern at creation in the book of Malachi, right the way through the New Testament documents. Many godly men, monogamous, they were appreciated. Polygamy wasn't appreciated, wasn't instructed. Clearly something that people could not have even construed as from God. People did sin, like King Solomon. No one would take him as an example of as to how many you get married to. He is an abominable example. I completely agree. Muhammad, on the other hand, is a perfect example for you. 6-year-old, 9-year-old, son's wife, all sorts of weird things.
Sorry,
stay away from him.
You've got to wrap it up quickly, just so we've got to keep this fair to time scale.
Done.
Okay, thank you very both. It's very, very, very interesting exchange. Very, very good. I hope our audience and people watching this afterwards are learning a lot from this. So we're now moving to our closing statements, where each of our panelists here will just give a 2-minute conclusion each. So, Mashud, in your own time.
Oh, am I first? Okay, excellent.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I know it was great talking to you. It was a blessing. I enjoyed it very much. I guess to the message, I think we saw a couple of examples. Arul does make many big, broad statements, and I think we delved in deep to quite a few of the examples: the adopted son business, the marriage of who you can marry, who you can't marry. I recommend people listening to it. I recommend going into the text, reading it for yourself, figuring it out for yourself. It is very clear-cut what you can do, and I'm sure the many other examples that Arul has mentioned that we didn't get time to get into, they're all of the same nature. I've done all the research. Many people have done the research. It's all there. You can do the same thing when it comes to the biblical text. The Timothy text is very clear cut. There is no equality between man and woman. You find fantastic, funky laws in the Old Testament, sandal pulling off, spitting in people's faces. If your husband gets into a fight and your wife comes into the fight and grabs the groin of the opponent, then you're supposed to cut the wife's hand off. These are instructions by God in Deuteronomy 25. So there's a fantastic amount of laws, and you can just look into this as well. But it was great having this discussion. I do think that the status of women in Islam is a lot higher. There is a huge amount of corpus that talks about the massiveness of the greatness of women. And sadly, I think Arul has been speaking mainly about just the few more tougher ones, I would say, but that's like 1%. Prophet forbade explicitly treat your wives as the best you can. You don't find these kind of statements. You find rather Paul saying, don't get married. It's not a good thing. Women are they're transgressors. They started things off. It's bad news. So read it for yourself. Read the text yourself. Come to your own conclusions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mashid. And finally, Brother Arul.
Can I start?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, sure. Sorry, I was waiting. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Mash. Wonderful conversation. Let me repeat. Quran, perfect example. Muhammad, terrible example. Marrying 6-year-old baby, having sex with her when she was 9 years old. Son's wife, daughter-in-law, getting married to someone without current wife's knowledge. Triple talaq. You can just divorce like that. Talaq, 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 and gone. And if she is gone, then before you can get her back, she needs to sleep around with someone else who you call halala marriage. Ultimately, the word nikah is revelatory. What you would normally translate as marriage in Arabic is very clearly sexual intercourse. So clearly that should tell you a story. Women are not respected. You are just seen as objects. 4 at a time. Muhammad had many more at a time. You're treated as treated as land that ought to be irrigated. Hijab, burqa, you can't even see people. It's your problem that you are beautiful and someone else is lusting with his tongue out. You need to cover yourself. This is abominable. This is insane. You can beat your women up, and most women are in hell. Insane ideas in Quran. In contrast, when it comes to the Bible, one woman, one husband. Godly example. Jesus Christ is the perfect example. In regards to eternity, we are told Jesus Christ is the Lord, and the bride of Christ is the church. One man, one woman. Adam, and as how it started in Adam and the woman, it ends with Jesus and his bride. Beautiful, lifelong commitment of great love and sacrifice. This is what we find. Leave Islam, come to the Lord Jesus Christ. Mash, including you. I'd really like for you to leave and come soon. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you to both our panelists. That concludes our debates. Brother Arul, will you be taking any questions and Mashid any from the live chat at all, or are we going to?
Oh, was there a live chat thing? I don't know.
Can you see that, Mash? On the side panel, you have a comments section, and that should show you.
There's loads of them.
Loads from the audience there. This is all from YouTube, by the way, live chat.
There's a lot absolutely. I don't know who they were talking to, but anyway, about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm to be fair,
you're shouting a lot. Arul, people are complaining about your sound.
No, I
Yeah,
think they
no,
were
I
complaining
think it
about
was
the fact that the
it was
microphone wasn't working.
yeah, it was about the microphone
Uh,
when it got really. I think there's a bit of network
it's you're
latency there, and
playing
it
up.
got a
It's
bit
this
bubbly.
one guy, UG, is complaining about your sound a lot, Arul.
Yeah,
Yeah. The microphone clearly. I need to test again. See how this.
99% was fine. It was just the odd little bubble, sounded a
Sure.
bit bubbly, but it was okay. It
Sure.
was all right. Yeah.
Sure.
I'm happy to stick around if you want me to. Up to you entirely.
The only problem, brother Aaron, is just to be fair to Mash also. Of course, most of the audience would be Christian.
Yeah.
So to be fair to me also, as a matter of fact, questions would be mostly to him. I'm assuming, at least critical question would be to him, which would give him more time to clarify. Now, what could have happened, in the future, we might do this actually, is where we could pre-announce to Mash, so he can share his the link to others, in his community. So
For
we
future,
have
Arul, I mean, I would love to come back if you permit me.
absolutely. You're most
Um,
welcome, Mash.
Yeah.
You're a gentleman. Of course, we disagree on what is abominable
Yeah,
or
we
not.
disagree, but I think we both smile at the end of it, and we had a good discussion. I look at some of the questions, and well, you're right. I won't get it. Won't be fair that I get more time, more airtime. I completely agree. Arul.
Yeah.
So
Well, one he will be in the negative because people will be criticizing or critically evaluating his position more. But I'll be in the negative in the sense that he'll have more time to clarify. So I do apologize.
This mission for AJ seems to be very excited and is asking a lot of questions.
That's me.
Oh, is it you?
Yeah.
Maybe Aaron, me and you will can have a discussion in the future. I guess, isn't it?
One time, yeah, maybe. By God's grace, yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Masha.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in other words, I think we would need to. Mash, what do you think? I think because we didn't plan for this and therefore don't have a proper arrangement for this, for it to be a fair Q&A from the audience.
For next time, what we'll do for next time, if you give me, as you did give me notice, I wasn't aware, but for next time, what I can do is I can push this link out to more of my community friends. They can come and watch as well. What I will do though, this will stay on YouTube, right?
Yes. Yeah,
I will forward the link to around and let people listen, and then hopefully they'll be encouraged to come for the next time, and then you can get maybe more Ahmadi guests coming on this if you will allow us.
In our email conversation, by the way, Mash, the link should be there. So
you did. I did
YouTube
see that.
Link should be there already. Yeah.
I will spread that link out.
Sure. Cool.
Okay.
Very Mash.
Thank you very much. I will hope maybe I'll see you again, Aaron, in Speaker's Corner. Maybe Aaron as well. Then yeah.
Yeah, maybe by God's grace, I'll be there one time. So
okay.
God bless you.
Thank you very much.
God's blessings to you both. Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you for everyone in the chat also.
Bye-bye then. Bye.